All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, or to the right of the video if you're on a larger screen. All right. We'll start here with Cameron. So Cameron says, any suggestions? Any suggestions how to stop tucking my arms with my driver? Tucking my arms with my driver. So it's kind of a loaded question. So first of all, why wouldn't you want to tuck your arms? What problem is that causing? At what point in the swing? I need a little bit more detail on that. Yeah, it's kind of, I'm not really sure what you're asking about there, but let's go on. It says I set up with the club on the ball, or I set up with the club center on the ball, but everything comes off the toe. So what we want to understand is that just because we set up a certain way, that doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen at impact. So you can set up on the toe and hit it in the center. You can set it up on the center and hit it on the toe. You can hit it anywhere, right? So focus on how you're coming into contact, um, and however you set up. It's just to help you to get into a better contact position. That's really what it comes down to. So if you're hitting the ball off the toe all the time, what I would recommend doing is change your intention to hitting the ball off the heel. If you do that, that will move the strike more in the center of the face. Or, if you're not intending to hit the ball in the center of the face, if you don't actually swing with that kind of intention, actually try to swing with the intention of hitting the ball in the middle of the face and see if that helps. And if you still hit off the toe, then change your intention to hitting it off the heel, and that will move the strike more to the center. And really commit to it. Now you're not going to have to do that forever. Eventually, you're going to adapt, and you're actually going to start hitting the ball off the heel. So don't worry about that. And then if you do, you just tone it down. And then goes on to say, I also have a low trajectory while having a +1 angle of attack. Could the two be related? So yeah, if you're hitting it off the toe, you're not transferring as much energy to the ball, so the ball's just not going to get up in the air quite as much. So that could be part of it. You could also not have a lot of club head speed, which won't let the ball go very high. If you don't give the ball enough energy, it won't keep climbing up in the air. You may have too little loft on your driver. This is something that I often see because, a lot of times people buy drivers you know, off the shelf. They don't get fitted for their drivers. I'm not sure if this is you, Cameron, but and those drivers that you buy are generally going to be around 9 degrees, right? Because they just don't sell 12-degree drivers because no one will buy them because most pros don't hit them. Well, most pros have enough club head speed to get the ball up in the air, and they hit the ball up on it enough to get the ball up in the air more. So yeah, you could hit up on it a little bit more. That can help. Get +3, +4. That will help the ball launch higher. Get the ball more up in the air. If you get the strikes more in the center of the face, it will probably go higher as well because you're transferring more energy to the ball. You play a higher lofted driver, you get the ball up in the air more as well. So I'd recommend get professionally fitted for your driver to kind of get those all optimized. But that's what I'd recommend doing. Drivers off the rack, 10.5 degrees, swinging around 100, 105. Yeah, you could also be hitting it low on the face. So if you hit it off the toe and low off the face, then that will also, because that 10.5 degrees, that's to the middle of the face. And the driver faces are domed, right? So the lower part of the face is actually going to have less loft. You could have 7.5 degrees lower on the face. So that could be what's going on as well. Hard to say without seeing your swing exactly what the problems are, but I imagine if you start hitting it in the center of the face, you hit up on the ball a little bit more, you hit it, and you'll be good to go. But and I would also check your driver. You could have crack in your driver or something like that. I actually had this experience where, I was working with a friend of mine, and you know, he would hit the ball and like everything looked good, and the ball just wouldn't go anywhere. And he was hitting it dead in the middle of the face, like we were using the foot power spray and everything, hitting it dead in the middle of the face. And then I was thinking, there's got to be something wrong with the driver, right? Because there's he's doing everything with he's swinging the club the right way. He's hitting the ball in the middle of the face. So I actually inspected the driver, and there was a little crack on the lower part of the face, it was just, without looking close at it, you couldn't really see it. So that could be a little bit of what's going on as well. You could have, equipment, a little bit of an equipment issue. All right, keep the questions coming. No problem, Cam. I wish I could give you a little bit more, but yeah, I'm not really sure. And if you give me a little bit more information about the tucking arms thing, I can help with that. But yeah, I'm not really sure exactly where you're going with that. Because if you're keeping your arms close to your body like this, that can reduce your speed. I mean, you're swinging 100, 105, which is pretty good, right? Definitely well above average there. But you might be able to get a little bit more speed if you were to lift your arms, right? Get the arms up in the air a little bit more. The skyscraper drill might be a really good one for you from the 20-minute distance fix. So if you go to the 20-minute distance fix by clicking the instruction tab at the top of the screen, 20-minute distance fix, and then if you go to the week 3 drills, the skyscraper drill is the last one in there. Or you can search skyscraper on the website as well. Should come up. So Cameron C said that is the tuck when I come through, my upper arms are into my body. Yeah, they should be. You don't want your arms away from you. You want them to be close to you as you're coming into contact. So it's not really a problem. Unless I'm misunderstanding what you're. All right, so Tim C says, if I concentrate on the left hand and have no pressure in the right, divots are perfect. Any pressure in the right hand moves the divot back. All right, do you have a question, Tim? Thanks for sharing. I don't know if you have a question or what. Sounds like you found a feel that works for you. I mean, literally, that's not what's happening, right? You're definitely putting some, if you're touching the club, you're putting some pressure into it, right? But less pressure is leading to better divots. So my guess is you're probably overactive with that right hand and really pushing that hand through instead of being nice and soft with the hands and letting your body come through. That's, if I had to guess, that's probably what's going on. So yeah, just keep up what you're doing. Sounds like you're on the right track. Aldo says, hi Q, I'm a bit confused about the straight line release. Specifically, I'm confused as to how one would be able to perform the move and achieve ulnar deviation as well. Please clarify this confusion. P.S. Your videos are informative and your prose is succinct. Thank you. No problem, Aldo. All right, so let's talk about what the release is. So the release, let me get back here to my screen. All right. So the release, when we say the club is released, that's when the club is splitting the forearms, right? So I'm going to choke up on this club here so you kind of see when the club's splitting my forearms. So I'm coming into contact. Here I am. Here's impact, right? And then I'm going to release that club out in front. So now you can see right here, my club is splitting the forearms. Where I want that to happen is roughly about 45 degrees out in front. There's an acceptable range. I'd say an acceptable range for a high-level player is going to be in the area of 30 to 50 degrees, maybe even 55 degrees. Dustin Johnson's pretty far out there. So that would be the release, okay? So, and then also to talk about another term that you mentioned, which is ulnar deviation. So ulnar deviation is thumbs out. So thumbs up is radial deviation. Thumbs out is ulnar deviation. Now, when he talks about the move, we don't really talk about the move anymore on the website. We've actually gotten rid of the move because it's just not necessary. And for most golfers, it's just it's a very difficult thing to do, which is why we kind of changed gears because we tested a lot of golfers. We just found it's a lot easier just to use a stronger grip and not do the move, right? But what the move was basically bowing the wrist. And the benefits of bowing, there are benefits to this. So bowing the wrist, that that does two things. One, it closes the club face, right? Because if I do this, it closes the club face. And two, it shallows out the club, right? But for most people, this is a very difficult thing to do. And I also learned that you actually will lose a little bit of speed a lot of times from doing it. Now, if it puts the club in a better position and you lose your legs a lot more, that can help you to create some speed. But the problem is that when you bow your wrist, you can't put as much force into the handle, and when you can't put as much force in the handle, you can't swing the club as fast. So that's where you're going to be kind of losing a little, possibly losing a little bit of speed. So that's why I generally don't recommend it. I just recommend using a strong grip and swinging to the right. It's really the easiest way to do it. Very simple, but people sometimes don't want simple. They want to overcomplicate things. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm more a big fan of simplification. Just makes things a lot easier. So yeah, the move is bowing the wrist, which is a different move than ulnar deviation, right? So if I bow my wrist, which is the move, right? So if I'm bowing my wrist, I'm shelling out the club. I can come down and I can still go into that ulnar deviation. So I can bow my wrist and go into ulnar deviation. I can do both, right? So that's what's happening. So when you come into contact, you're doing this, right? You're throwing the club, you're unhinging the club, you're going into ulnar deviation. And then when you're coming down, right, you're bowing, you can bow the wrist. There are players that do this. John Rahm would be one of them, right? You bow the wrist, shallow out the club, and then come into contact and release it, right? So you can see how I can still go into ulnar deviation and bow my wrist. If you want to see a pretty exaggerated illustration of this happening, go to YouTube and search Colin Morikawa golf swing. TaylorMade actually has an awesome video that shows face on and down line at the same time. And it's super slow motion, high quality video. And you'll see how he's bowing his wrist and he actually comes into contact, right? And he's going into ulnar deviation when he comes into contact. Because if he was the same here, right, as he was down here, the club would be like this. So he has to ulnar deviate to get the club down to the ground, right? So, but then when he comes into contact, he has a lot of bow in his wrist still, right? So that's how those kind of work together. They're two different things, right? So the wrist can move basically in 6 different ways. You have radial deviation. Radial deviation is thumbs up. Ulnar deviation is thumbs out. So you can think of it as hinging and unhinging, right? And then we have flexion and extension, right? So this is bowing and cupping the wrist. And then we have rotation of the wrist. So pronation is inward rotation, supination is outward rotation. So those are the moves of the wrist, right? So those are the things that you can do. You can do all of them. You can move your wrist through a full range of motion, right? So I can be, pronated, flexed, and then also in ulnar deviation, right? All those things can happen. All right, let's keep going. Although, let me know if you have any further questions about that, if something wasn't clear there. So Carrie says, what is the proper head position at impact for shots from the fairway? Well, a lot of that depends on the shot that you're trying to hit, but generally, if you have a ball position that is, middle-ish to just forward to the middle, your nose is going to be on the ball to just slightly behind the ball, typically. Now, if I'm trying to drive it in really low, I might actually have the ball a little bit more back in my stance, and I might get my body a little bit more forward, and my head might actually be ahead of the ball. If I'm trying to hit the ball higher, I'm going to be more behind the ball. But you have to be a little bit careful with that, because if you try to hit the ball high by hitting up on it, you're not really going to be able to hit up on it on the ground. So you're going to be coming in more level, right? So it's going to be harder to make ball first contact when you do that. So just be a little bit careful with that. So Rick M says, hi Q, when hitting a draw, is it best to aim the club face square to the target or just slightly close to the swing path? I mean, so what we have to understand is what's happening at impact the way that you set up is just to help you to get into a good impact position. So however you set up, so for me personally, I'm a natural drawer of the golf ball. When I swing, what just comes naturally to me, I draw the ball. And when I do that, I'm squaring everything up to the target. My stance is square to the target. My face is square to the target at address. But that's not literally what's happening at impact, right? It's two different things. So in order to hit a draw onto the target, right, our club path needs to be in to out. Our club face needs to be closed to the club path to get it to draw, but it needs to be open to the target to get it to start to the right of the target, right? So let's say that this alignment stick, sorry, I'm getting over a cold. My voice is a little shot. Let's say that this alignment stick is the target line. Actually, let's switch this up. I'm going to say that this PVC pipe is the target line. Just because it's longer and you guys may not be able to see the other parts, right? So now let's say that this alignment stick, this is the club path, right? So that's the club path. So if I'm hitting a draw, now this is exaggerated for effect, but this is my target line, this is my club path. My club face is going to be like the club, right? So my target line is the PVC pipe. My club path is the alignment stick. And then the direction my club face is pointing is the club, right? So you can see how that's going to get a ball that starts to the right of my target and then draws back toward the target. Because my club face is close to the path, that's going to create right to left curvature, right? For a right-handed golfer. And because my face is open to the target, that's going to allow the ball to start to the right of the target, which I need to, so that way it can draw back toward the target. If let's say it was like this, right? Now, my club path is to the right. My club face is close to that path, but it's in line with the target. The ball flight that's going to create is a ball that starts at the target, then draws left of the target. And it's going to draw quite a bit because now there's a bigger space between my club path and my face angle, right? So the way you can think about it on the first example, right? This one here, this will create a ball flight that starts to the right of the target, then draws back onto the target. If we want to put numbers on it, we could say that my club path is 6 degrees into out, and that my club face is 3 degrees open. That's going to create a ball flight that starts about 3 degrees to the right of the target, then draws back toward the target, right? Because my club face is 3 degrees close to my target. It's 3 degrees open to, 3 degrees close to my path, but 3 degrees open to my target. Now, on this example, now my club face is still close to my target, or close to my path, but it's in line with my target, right? So if we want to put numbers on it, we could say my club path is still 6 degrees into out, but my club face is square. So that's going to produce a ball flight that starts at the target and then draws more toward the target. And it's actually going to draw a fair amount because my club face is now 6 degrees closer to my path instead of 3 degrees. So my ball is going to start at the target, and it's going to draw twice as much as it did when it was like this, when it was 3 degrees, right? So however you need to set up to make this happen, that's how you set up. It's going to be different for everybody. So for me, I set up everything square. Basically, I'm setting up like this. My stance is pointed toward the target, and my face is pointed toward the target. When I come into impact, it's like this, right? That's what allows me to come into impact the correct way. So that's how I do it. How you may do it may be something different, but that's what has to happen at impact. So if setting up with your stance closed at address, close to the target, gets you into the right position, then by all means do that. All right. Keep the questions coming.
So Cameron C says, any drill suggestions for thin fairway woods? Yeah. So most of the time when people are hitting their fairway woods thin, it's because they're playing the ball position way too far forward, and that leads to the club bottoming out where the ball is. And this is very common because a lot of people I know they're hitting that wood, right? And they see that intuitively they tend to want to push the ball position forward. The problem with that is that when you push the ball position forward, that makes if you don't make any other changes, that makes the where the club's bottoming out relative to the ball, it makes it happen at or before the ball. And if that's happening, then unless you have a lie where the ball is sitting up on the grass like it's on a tee, you're going to tend to thin it or chunk it, right? So I would move that ball position, hit your fairway wood the exact same way you hit your 7-iron. Hit it the same way, hit down and through it, play the same ball position. So just forward to the middle of the stance, get that ball just forward to the middle of the stance, hit down and through that ball, try to take a divot. You may not necessarily take a divot, but swing with the intention of taking a divot. You know, you can swing a 3-wood and a 7-iron the same exact way, have the same angle of attack, same place you're hitting the ground, all that stuff, and you hit the same turf, right? So have the same turf conditions that you're hitting, and it will produce a very different ground interaction because of the shape of the club, right? So we want to think of this in like an extreme sense. Think of like a wedge. Like a wedge, like this is like a 50-degree wedge. The wedge has a sharp leading angle. So when or leading edge. So when it has a sharper leading edge, it's going to tend to want to dig more into the turf. A fairway wood, which I don't have a fairway wood in here, but if you think of this driver as like a giant fairway wood, right? It's built very similarly. You can see how the bottom of this is rounded, right? So it's rounded. So there's only it's not, this whole thing isn't making interaction with the turf, whereas this whole thing is making interaction with the turf. The whole sole of this club and the leading edge is making it dig into the turf, right? So this is rounded. So only like this part is really interacting with the turf. And then because it's rounded and it doesn't have as sharp of a leading edge on it because it's a higher lofted club, it has that softer leading edge on there. It's not going to interact. It's not going to dig into the turf quite as much. The other thing is how the collision between the ball and the club, if you have more loft on the club, it will drive the club down, right? So imagine I'm coming in like this. There's this collision, right? And imagine this is like a solid steel ball, right? And that ball ain't going anywhere. Well, where's this iron going to go? It's going to go down like this because it's going to deflect downward. Whereas when you're hitting a lower lofted club, so let's pretend like this has no loft on it, it's going to deflect back this way, right? It's not going to go down. If I have more loft on it, it's going to deflect down because of the loft of the club. So higher lofted clubs are going to produce more divots, or bigger divots are going to tend to produce, more likely to produce divots because of the sharper leading edge of the club and because of deflection of the club going down. Whereas fairway woods, even though you might see a tour player come in and take absolutely no divot with a fairway wood, it doesn't mean that they're not hitting down on the ball. It just means that the turf that they're playing on might be firm, right? It might be hard and firm,
And then the club, it's not deflecting down into the ground as that softer leading edge on it. It's not going to tend to dig as much, right? So you're not going to produce that divot. You may not produce that divot because of that. It doesn't mean they hit it thin or that they hit it poorly. It just means that it's very well they could possibly hit it thin or something like that. But I see it all the time where a tour player will absolutely flush a 3-wood from the fairway, and there will be no divot or anything at all. But they flushed it. Well, they flushed it either because they had a lie where the ball was sitting up, and they hit down on it, but they didn't really get into the ground because the ball was sitting up on the grass, or the ground is really firm, right? And that 3-wood has that soft leading edge. It has, it's got that rounded bottom. It's not deflecting down on the ground. It doesn't drive it down in the ground like a wedge would. So my best suggestion would be to change your ball position, hit it the exact same way that you hit your 7-iron, and you'll more than likely start hitting those better. All right. So great tip, 50-50 weight balance on feet. At address, yeah, generally at impact, you're going to be much more on your lead side. You're going to be more like 75 to 80% on your lead side. But at address, yeah, you're going to be pretty 50-50. If you're a little more in one direction, that's fine. But generally, you're going to be about 50-50. Carrie T says, if adding a 9-wood to the bag, what club would that normally replace? I mean, it's going to be a middle iron of some sort. You would have to kind of go through your bag with the gapping. This is part of the reason why I recommend everybody get professionally fit, because you're just going to have to go out and trial and error. If you're putting a 9-wood in your bag, then you have to kind of see, okay, well, what other club in my bag kind of produces the same results, right? Because if I have a club that's producing the same results, then I don't really need both of those clubs, right? So that's what I would do, is I just see, okay, how far do I hit my 9-wood, right? Well, what club in my bag am I hitting the same distance? Whatever club that is, remove it. I don't know exactly what club that would be. It might be a little bit different for everybody as well, based on, your delivery, how you're delivering the club to the ball and all those things. Your club head speed, there's a lot of things that go into it. So yeah, I would either go get professionally fitted, so that way you can have the bag kind of, cover everything, or you're going to have to do some trial and error to see, okay, how far do I hit every club, and then remove the club that you're hitting the same as your 9-wood. All right. So Rick M says, thanks so much for that detailed explanation on hitting draws. I have 4 guys at my club all arguing over this topic, so I'm guessing many people have this question. Great answer. Thanks so much. Yeah. So it's really, I mean, it just comes down to physics, right? It's really just about what's happening at impact. However you set up I don't, I've often said your setup doesn't matter. It absolutely matters, but impact is what matters the most. So you just want to set up in whatever way gets you in the best impact position, right? So for some people, it's going to be a little bit different. What needs to happen at impact, no matter how you set up to hit a draw, if you want to hit a draw onto the target and hit it solidly, your club path needs to be in to out. And then your face needs to be close to that path, but open to the target, about halfway in between. So like I said, if you want to put numbers on it, if you swing the club 4 degrees into out, that club face needs to be 2 degrees open. That's going to produce a ball flight that starts about 2 degrees right of your target and then draws back toward your target, right? It needs to be halfway in between if you want to put numbers on it. And that's assuming that you hit it in the middle of the face, because you might you might get into this debate with your buddies, and then you get on TrackMan, and then you hit a shot, and let's say you hit one that's exactly 4 degrees into out, 2 degrees face open, but then the ball doesn't land on the target, right? Well, that's assuming that you hit it in the middle of the face. If you don't hit it in the middle of the face, then different things can happen, right? When I hit the ball on the toe, the face will twist open, right? When the face twists open, a couple things are going to happen. One, I'm not going to transfer as much energy to the ball, right? So it's not going to go quite as far. I'm not going to, or the ball's going to start more to the right than it normally would. Doesn't mean it's going to start to the right. It just means it's going to start more to the right than it normally would. So if my face is really closed and I hit it off the toe, my face is still close to the target, but it's going to start more to the right than it normally would, right? Because the face is twisting open. And then the last piece is that it's going to tend to draw more or fade less, right? So if I'm hitting a draw, and let's say I come in, all those things line up, but I hit it off the toe, well, that ball is going to start a little bit more to the right than it normally would, then it's going to draw more than it normally would, and it may not end up on the target line, right? And it's also not going to go as far. So those are all things you have to consider. So all that whole thing that I went over, that's assuming you make ball first contact, and if you make center face contact. Because if you don't, then the face is going to twist and you're going to get a different result. So like I said, I'm a natural drawer of the ball. So I set up square and it produces a draw that starts to the right of the target, then draws back toward the target. But if I were to hit a fade, I'm actually going to set up, let me get my PVC pipe out again. Let's say that this is the target line, right? If I'm hitting a fade, I'm actually going to set up with my feet more open because so that I can get my club path working out to in relative to the target. And I'm going to set up with my face a little bit open to my stance. Not much, just a little bit. And when I come through, I'm going to basically feel like I'm pushing my hands forward to get the club face in the direction of the target line. For me, that produces a ball flight that starts to the left of the target and fades back toward the target. That's what works best for me. If you did that, it may not produce the same. If you were a natural fader of the ball and you did that, you might slice it, right? So it really just depends. Just like for me, if I'm a natural drawer of the ball, and if I set up more closed and my face more closed, that's going to turn into a hook for me, right? Because I naturally just draw the ball. All right, let's keep going here. So Greg O says, this is a strange question, but I struggle getting my weight into my left heel on the downswing, even when I don't have a club in my hand. Can you tell me why and what I might do to correct this? I am not trying to square club, so what gives? So here's what I would look at. I would look at how your hips are moving in the backswing. Typically, when I see people struggle to get to their trail side, or excuse me, to their lead side, get to their lead heel, what's happening is they're too far to their trail side too late in the backswing. So basically, they're doing this, right? I'm not saying you're doing this, but it's just things that I commonly see. I would really need to see your swing to know for sure. But yeah, if you draw a line on the outside of your hip at address, right, your trail hip, what you would want to see is in the very beginning of the backswing, you'd want to see a little bit of a nudge into that line. And then as you bring it up halfway, your hip's just going to be on that line, just touching it. And then the last part of the backswing, you're going to create a little bit of space to get your momentum moving forward, right? So that's very common. If you don't get your momentum moving forward, that has a lot to do with it. And then the other part of it would be, let's say you do create that space, but you're not getting that momentum moving forward. Doing the step drill would be good. So starting with your feet together, throwing the club back, and then stepping forward, right? That would help you, and then try to translate, work through that progression to try to get you to your lead side. So yeah, that's what I would recommend doing, is get your momentum moving forward. Make sure that your hips aren't moving too far away. Start your backswing with the weight shift to the trail side, and make sure that you're shifting your weight to your lead side as you're getting up to the top. So let me actually with me here. All right, so this video I'm going to put into the chat. It's a video where I go over a drill to getting to your lead side, that chair drill, if you're sliding your hips. And then I also go over the step drill and a good progression there. So in that video, I kind of go over that. That's what I recommend doing. Excuse me. Then Grego says this occurs even when chipping and pitching. When you're chipping and pitching, you should just keep your weight on your lead side, right? Just keep your weight on your heel and leave it there. Have it on your heel to start, right? So I would just be here on your lead heel to start, right? And just keep it there. Don't ever move it away. That's pretty easy fix there. Because for those chips and pitches, we don't need the whole reason why we need a weight shift is to produce power, right? If I'm trying to throw a ball as powerfully as I can, I want to load up into my trail side and then use that load to transfer it into my lead side. That's going to create momentum. It's going to help me to push into the ground as well to help me to fling that ball. A chip shot, I don't need that. If I'm just tossing a ball, which is basically what a little chip shot is, right? If I'm just tossing a ball, I don't need a weight shift. I just have my weight on my lead side and just keep it there. All right, pretty easy fix for the chipping and the pitching for sure. But for the full swing stuff, I would check out that video that I put in the link where I go over the drills that I was just talking about. The step drill and then the chair drill to get your body more forward. Because my guess is you're just loading and sliding. You might be loading and sliding into your trail side too much and too late into the swing. All right, we got about 20 minutes left here. If we have any more questions, if not, no worries. I'm just working on the stuff I gotta do. If you're just joining us, I'm just waiting for some questions to be asked. I've answered all the questions so far. So if you got questions, now's a good time. If not, no worries. All right, so we got a question here from Willis. Says, I have trouble swinging on an arc and I force the swing straight, chasing the target. What do I need to do to swing more on that arc? Hard to say without seeing your swing, but what I would recommend doing is working through the 20-minute shallowing fix. A lot of people have trouble swinging on the correct arc because because the club face isn't in the right place. And that's kind of how the 20-minute shallowing fix works is we get the club face closed so that way we have incentive to swing from the inside. And then once we're able to do that, we overdo that, then we just tone that down. So I would just recommend working through the 20-minute shallowing fix because it's going to help you to get the club face closed first, and then it's going to incentivize you to swing more from the inside. So let me explain that in a little bit of a different way. So if I'm coming down and I sense my club face is open, right, I may swing more to the left to try to get the club face to point more to the left, right? So that's going to make me go off of the arc, right? Because if my face is open and then I swing on the arc, well, my face is just going to still be open, right? It's still going to be open to my target, and that's going to make the ball go right and right. So what I might do is I might swing to the left over the arc in order to get the ball to start to the left and curve to the right. So that'd be the first piece. So if I get the club face more closed, well, now I'm incentivized to swing to the right because if I have the face closed and I swing over the arc and swing to the left, now my ball's going to go left and left, right? So I want to get my face closed so that way I can swing to the right. So I would work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. That would be my best suggestion without being able to see your swing. Even if I saw your swing, I'd probably have you do something along the lines of the 20-minute shallowing fix. So to get to the 20-minute shallowing fix, click the instruction tab and then go to the 20-minute shallowing fix from there and work through the drills. All right, so BN Christ says, hi, Q. I have a perfect swing path on a dry swing, but as soon as the ball is in place, I come down steep. Why is this? Probably a similar answer to the question to Willis's question. I'd be almost willing to bet a good amount of money that on your practice swings, your club face is probably wide open. Because on your practice swings, you don't have to square up the face, right? Because there's no ball that you're hitting. So you can swing perfectly on the path. But if a ball was there, that ball would probably go right and right. So again, I probably just work through the 20-minute shallowing fix. To get to that course, click the instruction tab and then click the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. That will help you because we have to have that club face in a good spot first in order to be incentivized to swing the club from the inside. So just going back to what I said, if the face is open, you're going to tend to swing left and over the top steep to get that club face to be more in the direction of the target. All right, we got about 15 minutes left here. So Greg O says, what is the path of the butt of the club through the downswing and follow through? So what I would look at if you want to kind of see if you're having a good path, what I would look at is the elbow plane line. That's probably the easiest way to look at it. Because there is no one path. That's the one I want to explain as well. There's no one path, right? But in the beginning of the downswing, now through the ball, you're going to be much closer. When you look at the best players, but from the top of the swing, you're going to see a lot of different things because people at the top of the swing are just in different positions, right? So again, what I would look at is the elbow plane line. So to look at the elbow plane line, first you want to make sure that you have a good camera angle. You want to make sure that it's set up down the toe line. So the way that you would do that very easily, take an alignment stick, place it on the ground, line it up with a target out in the distance, right? So for me, when I line it up, I'll get behind it and I'll use my club to kind of line up the alignment stick with whatever it is out in the distance. And then when I set up the camera, I'm going to set up the camera to where this is going right down that. So if there's a laser coming out of the face of that camera, I'm going to have that going right down that alignment stick, right? And I'm going to use a tripod as well. A tripod is very, very important because I wouldn't trust somebody to hold the camera. One, when somebody holds the camera, they're going to hold it like this because it's just the most comfortable way to hold it, right? They're not going to hold it down here where they need to because that's uncomfortable to hold it down here. They're going to hold it up here and it's going to be moving. So use a tripod with a foam mount. You get them on Amazon, very cheap. Just search tripod foam mount. And if you already have a tripod, then you can just buy the foam mount part. It's like $10. If you get the tripod with the foam mount, it's usually like under $20. Now, there's not super high quality for that. It's going to be cheap, but it's going to do the trick. All right, so I'm going to set that up. I'm going to set it up at hip level around this height. And what's also important is I want it to be far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame throughout the entire swing. So this right here, this wouldn't work because my right foot's out of the frame. And when I take the club to the top, it's out of the frame as well. This camera angle is also too high as well. So again, down the toe line, you do that by setting up the alignment stick. When you go to set up to the ball, you're going to have your toes right up there close to it. You don't set up to it like this because that's going to make it look wrong. So this information is only going to be as good as the way that you set up the camera. If you set up the camera poorly, get a bad camera angle, you're going to get bad information. If you set up the camera correctly, you're going to get good information. All right. So now let's assume that you set up the camera correctly as I described. When you go to set up to the ball, right? On video, when you go and look at your swing, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line from the middle of the ball up to the middle of the elbow, right? And that's the elbow plane line. And that's how I would look at how the butt end of the club interacts with that. So when I go up to the top of the swing, what I want to see is I want to see the butt end of the club working toward that elbow plane line. If it's working out parallel with it, then your hands are going out too much. I want it to be working toward it. Now, if you have a more upright swing, you're not going to get on that. You're more than likely not going to get on that elbow plane line by lead arm parallel. If you have a flatter swing, right? So let's say you're like this at the top. You're more than likely you should be on that elbow plane line by lead arm parallel. But if you have an upright swing, you're probably not going to be. If you're somewhere in between, you're going to get very close to it. Within an inch or two of it coming in there. So from there, what I want to see is by hip level, halfway down, I want to see the butt end of the club on that elbow plane line or very close to it, right? If it's working out above it, then you're more than likely coming down steep. If you're underneath it, then you probably have the camera angle wrong because it's very difficult to get that far underneath it unless you're just really exaggerating or something like that. And then basically that butt end of the club is going to track on that elbow plane line all the way through. Even after impact, it's typically going to be on it. So that's what I would kind of look at as far as getting it on there. Now, if you're coming through and you're above it, right, then you're probably standing up and the handle's getting high and things like that. So Greg O says, could you describe how the right arm works in the swing? The best way I can describe it is like a throwing motion, right? And again, not everyone's right arm is going to work the same because people are putting their arm in different position at the top. Jack Nicklaus doesn't use his right arm the same way that Matt Kuchar does, right? Because Jack Nicklaus at the top of the swing was like this, and Matt Kuchar is like this. It's going to be very, very different, right? So it's not exactly the same from one person to another. But the way I would describe it is in the backswing, right? your right arm is going to externally rotate some amount, and your forearms are going to roll some amount. You're going to hinge the club up some amount, right? And then your wrist is going to extend back some amount, right? So all those things are happening, and your right arm is going to fold some amount. Usually no more. It's not going to go more than 90 degrees. It's usually going to be around that 90-degree position. If you were to throw a ball, that's exactly what's going to happen. Same kind of thing. That's where it's going to go, right? So that's how I would describe it. It's very much like throwing a ball. So if I were to kind of throw a ball sidearm, that's the position that I would get in. The downswing is just going to be all those things reversed, right, to get to the ball, right? So I'm going to have some amount of internal rotation. I'm going to have some forearm roll internally, right? I'm going to release that wrist into the ball, into the straight line release. That's going to release some amount, right? That's what's going to happen. And then my arm's going to straighten out some amount. Now, we can get it going too much, right? We can go like this, but that's typically because the club face is in a bad position. So I can tell you, so most of the time what I'm seeing when people don't use their right arm correctly, it's not because they don't know how to use their right arm or they don't know the correct way to use the right arm, and they just need to train the correct way to use the right arm. They're using the right arm in a way that we maybe don't see the best players in the world do, because they're reacting to the club face or the pitch of the shaft, right? So, for example, let's say I get up to the top of the swing and my club face is very open. Well, you might come over the top and throw this club out as a way to try to get the club face to point more to the left, right? So that's typically what's happening, right? Because when you throw a ball, you instinctually do all these things, right? But when you throw a ball, you don't have to square up the club face. You don't have to have the club path coming down a certain way, right? And you don't have to hit the ground, right, in a certain spot. That's what makes golf difficult, because there's a lot of parameters that you have to control as opposed to throwing a ball. Throwing a ball, there's parameters that you have to control for sure. But if I'm just throwing a ball and I'm throwing it 20 feet to somebody in front of me, it's not that big of a deal if the ball is up here over here, right? And I don't have to really, I can get the ball there in many different ways, right? If I try to cock back and do it fast, right? You're controlling variables, but it's just not quite the same, right? So a lot of what goes into how the right arm works is the way. If your right arm's not working correctly, it's usually because you're reacting to this club, right? You're putting this club in a bad position at the top, the club face in the bad position, and you're reacting to that. That's typically what's happening. All right, let's keep going. So Cameron C says, in my transition from back to downswing, I tend to raise my shoulders and head, losing spine angle. Is this considered early extension? Will the right arm throw you just described help? Yeah, I mean, if you're standing so let's explain what exactly early extension is and why it's called early extension, right? Extension is making the angle between your legs and your back bigger at your hip, right? So this is hip extension, this is hip flexion, right? So I'm bending at my waist here. So if I set up like this and in the backswing I do that, that's early extension. Well, it's called early extension because we want extension in the swing. We just don't want it to be too early, right? So some people, early extension might be standing up out of it at the top. Some people, they might be in a great position at the top, but when they start down, they extend the hips to start down, right? So what you need to do is you have to be incentivized to stay in your posture. So first and foremost, I make sure that you're in a setup position that's not too bent over, because typically when I see people who set up very bent over tend to stand up. So if you're kind of set up like this, you're going to tend to stand up because you can't really go up to the top like this, right? It's very difficult to do because you realize there's just not a lot of space for the club to come through. There's one tour player that I know of that kind of swings it like this, and that's Keegan Bradley. He's very successful doing that, but I just haven't seen a lot of high level golf. I would say he's like an outlier, right? An anomaly. So you can be successful. It's just very rare. I just don't see people being successful with it. So in your setup, what I would try to do is I would try to get to where the back of your armpit, if you were to draw a line straight down from the back of your armpit, that would go through your kneecap and through the balls of your feet. So that'd be like right here. Right. This would be kind of indicating that position. So this is the back of my armpit. It's going through my knee. So if I was really bent over, right, you can see how my back of my armpit's now over my toes, right? But if I stand a little bit taller, that's going to get me in a better position. So that's first and foremost what I would do. And then if you get in a good setup position, then what I would do is I would do the chair drill in combination with the 20-minute shallowing fix. Because a lot of times when people stand up out of their posture, it's because it's a way to shallow out the club. If I'm starting down steep, if I stand up, right, you can see how that shallows out the club, right? So if I'm starting down steep and I stay in my posture, I'm just going to come down even more steeply. So what people will do is they'll stand up out of it to get the club to shallow out. Now, I'd much rather have somebody that stands up and shallows it out than somebody that stays in their posture and comes over the top. But that's just not the way the best players do it. So I work through the 20-minute shallowing fix, doing the chair drill, get in your nice setup position where maybe you're standing a little bit taller and your hips, you're not so bent over, right? And I go up to the top, I pause, right hip on the chair. And then in the downswing, I'm going to keep my hip in the chair. I'm going to flex those hips to start the downswing, and I'm going to swing out to the right, right? So working through the 20-minute shallowing fix with the chair drill can help train your swing to be in a better spot. All right. We'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow, Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to y'all next time.